Hello and welcome again. If this is your first time with us, thank you for stopping by. You are listening to Choose to Endure, the show dedicated to the back of the pack runners, where we share stories, interviews, gear, and training tips specific to the tail end heroes of the ultra universe. If you haven't had a moment to do so yet, please consider heading over to your favorite podcast app, hit follow, rate the show, and if you're getting something of value, definitely feel free to leave a review and let others know as well. My name's Richard Gleave. I've been running ultras since 2017. I've taken on and finished numerous ultra distances at this point, all the way up through 220 miles, and I am unashamedly a member of the back of the pack, just like many of you. Now, today, we are super honored to have with us the magnificent Mr. Mike Horner. Mike is an accomplished back-of-the-pack ultra runner with a pretty impressive track record. He has completed numerous timed events, including a host of 24-hour races, multiple 200-mile races, particularly at the Swami Shuffle, which is where Mike and I bumped into each other in an adventurous last 24 hours. And he's also done a few 150-mile events too. But most recently, just a few weeks back, in fact, Mike achieved a significant milestone by participating in the 6 days in the Dome race in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, where he managed to clock up a pretty staggering 322 miles, marking his longest run to date. That is just incredible. Not only that, though, in addition to his athletic pursuits, Mike is also host of the Living an Ultra Life podcast, which he has been doing for several years now, where he talks with guests and shares his experiences and insights into our ultra running community. Mike's dedication, achievements, and enthusiasm make him a standout figure in the sport, and I'm thrilled to have him on the show to discuss his most recent accomplishment, as well as a little bit about his journey as an ultra runner. So don't go anywhere. We are about to jump right in.
Discover raw, inspiring stories from runners who've been right where you are. This is the Choose to Endure Ultra Running Podcast with your host.
He's English, not Australian.
Richard Gleave.
Mike, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for taking a short break from Living an Ultra Life and joining us here. I hope you're rested up and healing well at this point. How are you doing, sir?
I'm doing really good, surprisingly. I'm already considering hopping back into my next training block. Recovery has been amazing, so I'm feeling very good.
Brilliant. Well, before we get into the running stuff, I would like the listeners to get to know a little bit about you first. So if you wouldn't mind, who is Mike? Where are you based? And what do you do when you're not running?
Cool. Well, my name is Mike Horner, like you said, and I am based in Virginia Beach, Virginia. Just turned 60 a couple days ago, so significant milestone there.
Happy birthday.
Yeah, when I'm not running ultra marathons, I'm a partner in a lighting manufacturers agency. Just became a full partner about 9 months ago. So I've been in the lighting industry for, oh my gosh, since 2008. So got a lot of years in the lighting industry, both starting in sales and then moving into a manufacturer's sales position, ran a electrical distributorship in Sheridan, Wyoming for a number of years. And now I'm back in Virginia Beach as a partner in a lighting manufacturer's agency, which is just a fancy way of saying that rather than manufacturers hiring salespeople all over the country, they hire agencies. And so we represent 26 different lighting manufacturers. So that's what I do on a full-time basis. I'm the guy who's out there working with the architects, engineers, contractors, and electrical distributors to move product.
Brilliant. And I tell you what, 2008 seems like such a long time ago now, doesn't it? I mean...
Yeah, it does. It's like sometimes I sit there and think it was just yesterday, and then all of a sudden I realize, man, that was 16 years ago. There are people that are around that weren't even alive then.
Very true, very true. And now, if you go have a look at your Ultra sign-up account, where you go poke around there. Now, Mike, you were, can I say, relatively late into the ultra running scene. It looks like you got started around 50 years old. So,
Exactly.
how and why did you initially kind of get into the ultra scene?
It was an accident.
Oh, right.
So when I was turning 50 in 2014, I had run probably 2 or 3 marathons at the time. So I didn't start running until I was 46. Like, I used to make fun of all the runners because I grew up a hockey player and a football player. And the only time you ran is when you screwed up and, you had to go run laps or something like that. Yeah. So, my whole adult life, I was in sales. I golfed. That was my main thing was, I golfed and I stunk at that. So I don't even know why I chased that little white ball because it never went where I wanted it to go. And so at some point, my wife and I had lived overseas. We had come back and I had gained a ton of weight. So I was pushing 265 pounds and I was getting ready to go make a sales call and I was in a size 40 pants. I breathed way in as I was used to doing and got my pants buckled and then I breathed out. And when I breathed out, my button popped across the room and I realized that I needed to go buy a size up in pants. And so went and bought a size 42 pair of pants and realized I was going the wrong way and decided I need to change my health trajectory. And so that was in 2010, like late November 2010. And I went for my first run right after Thanksgiving in 2010. And I guess you could say I haven't stopped running since. But I got into ultras in 2014 in January. My wife and I were living in Sheridan, Wyoming. And I walked into the kitchen one morning. I said, "Hey, I'm going to run 50 miles on my 50th birthday." And my wife looked at me and she's like, "You are absolutely insane." And, I told her that's true, but you've been married to me for a long time, so you already knew that. So my first ultra marathon was just a 50-mile route that I made up on my 50th birthday on July 3rd, 2014. It was a really, really hot day in Sheridan. And I ran 50 miles and, Sheridan's a very small town. So it was a slow news day. And somehow one of the television stations came out and interviewed me about 35 miles into my run. And the owner of the sports shop was a gal named Karen Powers. And she contacted me and she said, "Hey, I just saw you ran 50 miles. Do you know there are races that are called ultra marathons?" And I have not stopped running ultra marathons since. So that's how I got into ultra marathons. I am totally committed to the back of the pack because I have chased every cutoff there is to chase.
Wonderful. So, Mike, the other thing that I noticed when looking at your ultra sign-up account, now you're a guy who likes a timed race. It seems like you've done a lot of timed races over the years. What is it about that particular format, do you think, that appeals to you?
I think it's because, like, when you run a, distance race, there's always cutoffs and everything. And I think I stress myself out too much running, distance races. Like I've done, plenty of distance races and completed plenty of distance races, but I don't have as much fun at them as I do at timed races. Timed races, it's like I take all the stress of a cutoff out of the equation and just go out and have fun and encourage the other runners out there and, just really see how far can I push my body in this given time. And so I think the timed races have become more my thing because I can just go out, have fun, be the goofball that I am and not worry about cutoffs.
Yeah, the cutoff stress is real.
Yeah.
That's kind of why I haven't done quite as many 100 miles as I have, because and it seems ridiculous to say it, but even 100 milers, it can get really stressful when you're, especially technical ones or mountainous ones, whatever, you can be chasing cutoffs pretty early in those races again, which seems really weird when you're saying it's 100 miles, but yeah, you can be chasing cutoffs pretty quickly in those.
Yeah. And once you start tickling them, it gets more stressful. I remember my first 100-miler attempt was at Lean Horse, and I tickled the cutoff at mile 42 and probably ate something that I shouldn't have ate. And I spent the next 8 miles throwing up, and I got to mile 50 and tried to go on and I couldn't go on. And then I got cut off and it was like, wow, okay, that stunk, so I had to learn a lot about how do I manage the cutoffs and how do I manage the disappointment of, oh wait, I'm not going to be in the front of the pack, and just trying different methods. For me, the biggest thing was learning in a distance race to go to the back at the start of the race, so I didn't pretend that I was one of those sleek fast runners and go out too fast and then burn myself out in the first 10, 12 miles. And I've had more success since I started doing that. I've finished 300 milers, and so
Yeah.
you figure out how do you do it, and how do you stay within yourself and run your own race instead of trying to compete with people that you don't have any business trying to compete with.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. But I agree. I think the timed races really give you the opportunity to work within yourself and build your own race almost. You set your own goals. There's not a DNF really in a timed race. It's just, are you going to accomplish whatever goal you set out to do? And
yep.
I think that's a great way to do racing, and a really different approach to trying ultras, which I think works for a lot of people. Now, Mike, at what point during your racing did you start to think about a podcast? How did the idea for Living an Ultra Life come about? Was that right at the beginning, or did that sort of evolve as you were telling stories of your races? Where did the podcast idea come from?
So it was during the COVID pandemic, and it was kind of in the fall of 2020. And I've just, my mom and dad would tell you I've always been a rebel without a cause. And I was so tired of everybody saying what you can't do. And I was just like, we were not created in a can't do mentality. We were created in a can do mentality. And I'm so tired of every time you turn on television or radio or pick up any news type of thing, everybody's telling me what you can't do. And I was just like, one, I'm part of the ultra running community, and I'm seeing people do things that you would never think you could do. Like I completed 200 milers during the pandemic, both virtual because they got canceled. But they said, hey, you can go out and run this. You just got to complete it in this time frame. One of them was 28 hours, and the other one was 26 hours.
Yeah,
I was like, I can do that. And so I completed my first 200 milers virtually, and it was like, wow, there's nobody here cheering. My buckle got mailed to me. One of them got mailed to me 6 months later, and I opened it up, and I was like, I don't even remember which one this was.
What was that?
The podcast came about from that, because I was like, wouldn't it be awesome if we featured stories about what we can do? And we began refocusing our minds on, instead of this hyper focus on what we can't do, and started focusing on what we can do. And so living an ultra life is kind of one of those things that, when I became part of the ultra running community, I've always kind of struggled in my geekdom, dorkiness, being a goofball and everything, of fitting in. And when I started running ultra marathons, I quickly found out that the ultra running community is very accepting of people, and you don't have to have all your stuff together. You can be a total goofball, you can be a mess, you can be whatever, and the community welcomes you in with open arms and says, hey, come run with us. And so I was like, if we could be more like the ultra running community as a society, we would be okay. I mean, all this hyper partisan divide along political lines and ideological lines and everything, if we would stop all that stuff and learn to cheer for each other and learn to accept each other just as we are, we'd be okay. And so that's where Living an Ultra Life came from. And so the podcast started in December of 2020, and we've been going since then. And it's a quirky little niche podcast that has pretty good listenership and shocks me. And we have some amazing guests that come on, and they shock me because, they all come on and say, well, I don't have a story to tell. And then you're an hour later going, okay, we sort of got to wrap this up, and they realize, wow, I had a story to tell. And, so my motto has become, the worst story that is ever told is the one that never gets told. So I just want to provide a format for people to be able to tell their story.
Oh, really cool. Yes. And so listeners, definitely go check out Living an Ultra Life if you haven't already, and if you have a moment. Absolutely. Now, what we really want to get into here, Mike. We want to get back into and hear about your whole 6 days in the dome experience that you just went through in Milwaukee. I want to say, before we get into what got you in there and how the race panned out for you, maybe you could take a few minutes to sort of give an overview for the listeners. What exactly is 6 days in the dome? What's the format? We said it's in Milwaukee, but what are the rules? Kind of give us the background to 6 days. What does this race look like?
Yeah, 6 days in the Dome is an amazing race. So the race directors are Bill Schultz and Mike Melton, who are, when I start to tell you the format of this race, you're going to be amazed that these guys can pull this stuff off, because it amazed me. But the format is, so this year there was a 10-day race, a 6-day race, multiple 72-hour races, multiple 48-hour races, multiple 24-hour races, multiple 12-hour races, and then a 24-hour invitational where they brought in the top 24-hour runners, not just from America, but there were a couple international runners in there also. And you want to talk about an exhibition and just amazing human beings running around a 443-meter track that in the middle of the running track, which is only 3 lanes, so it's not as wide. None of the lanes are as wide as like your normal high school outdoor track, but probably the 3 lanes combined are probably about the width of 2 lanes on a normal outdoor track. So that's what you're running on. The surface is a concrete surface with a thin covering, and I don't remember the covering that it's covered with, but the concrete is very, very hard because, of course, in the middle are 2 full-sized hockey rinks. And then on the outside of the hockey rinks is a long track that they didn't actually have ice for speed skating. So, and this is all indoors. So the constant temperature is 55 degrees, 35% humidity. So your real feel is somewhere around 52 degrees all the time, night and day. The lights never go off. So the lights are on 24/7. And
Wow.
That's what you're running under. And trying to find ways to creatively sleep and all that stuff. They would provide a lunch and a dinner for you. So our calorie intake was phenomenal, and the meals were catered in, and they were all really, really good. It was good food. It wasn't like stuff going, oh, how am I going to cram this down? It was all good food that you look forward to. So phenomenal race directing when you think about all the different races that Mike and Bill put on over a 10-day period, and pulled it off flawlessly with some of the most amazing performances by people that I've ever witnessed in my entire life.
Yeah. And so that sounds like a lot of races all going on simultaneously. How many people were on the track? I mean, was there a big crowd in those 3 finish lanes?
Yeah, the only day where there were a lot of runners on the track. So I think there were 24 10-day runners. There were 23 6-day runners. The most people that I ever experienced on the track was probably like my maybe in the 3rd or 4th day. I don't remember which one it was. There were probably 60, 70 runners total on the track. But normally you had anywhere from 40 to 50 on the track at one time during the day. Once you got into the nighttime hours, those went down a lot, because a lot of the runners would, they'd come out, they'd run 10, 12 hours, and then they'd go back to the hotel room. And these are probably the sane ones. They'd go back to the hotel room and they'd get a full night's sleep. And then us insane people would continue on until we couldn't physically continue on any longer. And then we'd go upstairs to a heated room where it looked like a triage room. By day 4 of my day 4, which for the 10-dayers was their day 6, that place looked like a triage room with people trying to, tape toes, get their feet up, and you're all sleeping on air mattresses and little bitty cots. So it was kind of funny to watch the sleeping, and I'm putting big air quotes in there. So it was crazy.
And so how did you guys, did they give you a space to put an aid station? How did you set up wherever your space was going to be for that many people around the track?
So when we got there, so the 10-day people and the 6-day people we're told that you go pick a table, and that spot and 3 yards on either side of that is your spot. So however you want to set it up, you set up your table, your spot, however you want. So I at first was like, well, I'm going to sleep down here. I'm not going to go upstairs. And so I had my air mattress down there the first night. And then, I had my table arranged. So, I use Scratch. Super Fuels is kind of the main kind of thing that I use for fuel. And then, I'm a big proponent. I don't do gels or anything, but I use peanut butter packs, the Justin's peanut butter packs.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So those were out on my table. My honey stinger waffles were out on the table. And then, of course, Tylenol, aspirin, lots and lots of Tiger Balm was used. And that's all out on your table and everything. And so, first aid, taping toes or anything like that when you got hot spots and all that kind of stuff. That was your table. And so that was the first day I kept my air mattress downstairs until I realized that trying to sleep in 55 degrees weather is really cold. So it was not comfortable.
And we've done cold before, you and I. So
we've done. I was going to say, Richard and I have learned that, cold. Of course, we were cold and extremely wet. So you add that on there, and it was kind of, our last 60 miles, Richard and I endured a lot. It was amazing. So trying to sleep downstairs was not good. So I brought my air mattress upstairs the second day.
Brilliant. So only the 10 day and 6 day has got a table?
They got a table, and then when 70, there was enough tables to go around. So 72 hours, they would all do a table. And then there was a lot of sharing going on. I shared my table with a 24-hour runner, just kind of scooted my stuff over and, gave one of my chairs, because we had 2 chairs. And so gave him one of my chairs and, part of the table, and he put his stuff there and, ran his 24-hour race and wisely went home when he was done with his 24-hour race. And I continued on for another 3 days. But so a lot of that was happening. So there was a lot of sharing of spaces.
Did they stagger the start of each of those races so that everyone finished at the same time, or were there races finishing while other races had, while the 10-day was still going on, you guys were still going? How did they stagger the finishes?
So, some of the 12-hour races all started at 9 a.m. and then they would finish at 9 p.m. So they only did 2 turnarounds. So every 6 hours you would turn around. So all the races started at noon otherwise. So all the, 48, 72, 6-day and 10-day races all started at 12 noon. And then you would turn around every 6 hours. And then what they would do is there were only maybe 10 or maybe 12 people who ran 12 hours. There's one gal crushed it. She did 63 miles in 12 hours. I was like, you are not of this world. So, because Mike doesn't even think about doing 60 miles in 12 hours. But she was amazing. But the 12-hour runners started at 9, and then they would start at 9 a.m. and end at 9 p.m.
Gotcha. So now, Mike, what initially drew you to participate in this event as either a part of your 60th celebration or just in general? What was it about this event that kind of drew you to it?
So I've always wanted to know what's the furthest I could possibly run before I don't have anything left. So I was talking with one of my friends who just happens to be the race director of Swami Shuffle 200. And I was telling him this story. I was telling him, I want to discover what is it like to get to that point where physically, you can't go another inch, where mentally, you can't go another inch. And he goes, hey, there's this 6-day race that happens in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. It's in a hockey arena. He said, you should look into that. And so I did. And so the more and more I thought about it, I was like, yeah, this could be it. This would be a perfect, 60-day race. Initially, when I signed up for it, it was going to be my 59th ultramarathon finish. And so I was like, that's kind of cool, get my 59th ultramarathon finish there. And then a friend invited me down to run a really fun 50K down in North Carolina. So now it became my 60th ultramarathon finish. And also I was like, it's kind of symbolic, running one day for every decade I've been on this earth. And so all I've got to do is, move the 6 days. And I just wanted to physically and mentally reach that point where I couldn't move another inch.
Wow. Very cool. Well, I think you ended up having a really great race. So however you set about doing it, I think it's gone well. But how did you go about preparing for really to run 6 days? I mean, we run pretty far and we run for a number of days, but 6 days seems like a lot. So were there any specific routines or differences in training methods from what you've used before that you changed and maybe found particularly effective now looking back on the race itself?
Yeah, I actually did some really strange races, not races, but runs, training runs where I would start at like 10 p.m. And I would find places like I had a friend who has a warehouse, and I was like, hey, can I borrow your warehouse from 10 p.m. until 8 the next morning? And he's like, what are you going to do? And I was like, I'm going to run around the inside of your warehouse for 10 hours. He's like, you're insane, but yep, here's the code. Just make sure you don't, unlock any doors that need to be unlocked, and just keep it locked. And I was like, okay, no problem. So, I set up a little course in his warehouse and ran around a warehouse for 10 hours because I wanted to find out, how does my body react in the early morning hours? How does my body react at 2 a.m.? Because my whole thing was, you're going to have a lot of noise because, it's a hockey arena. And I know what a hockey arena sounds like and everything. So I knew the sounds and stuff I was going to hear. You're going to have music blaring all the time. The lights are going to be on, during the day. So there's a lot of, it's not like Swami Shuffle where you're in Desolation Alley, between Bass Knight Bridge and Jug Handle Bridge. And there's nothing, there's none of that.
Yeah.
There's always going to be people around. There's always going to be these external things that are going on. And so I wanted to find out how well I could move in the early morning hours versus the wake hours, because that's where I've always kind of stunk as an ultra runner, is I hit 2 a.m. and I get loopy brained. And so I wanted to force myself to work an entire day. I think I did a podcast interview in the evening and then, headed out to this warehouse at 9 p.m. And I did that twice, just because I wanted to push myself. And both times I went over 40 miles. I think I did 46 one time and 48 the other time. So I knew I could hit the miles and stuff if I could just stay awake. And so that was kind of the big thing that I changed in my training. Of course, I had never run a track. So I've never done a speed workout before this. And I was like, so I talked to some friends of mine that are really good runners. And I was like, okay, explain this whole track workout thing to me, because I don't understand the markings on a track. Remember, I've never run track or anything, so I don't know any of this stuff. So I was like, teach me, what are the markings on a track? How do I told them I wanted to do the run walk method.
Mm-hmm.
I said, what are marks that I should look for to do? And so they taught me that. And so I did a couple track workouts and stuff. And I think one was like 3.5 hours and pouring down rain in April. And that was not fun, but whatever. It's what we do as ultra runners. And so, I did some different training, runs and stuff, would eat a large dinner and then go out and run after eating a large dinner, just to see how my stomach reacted with a good amount of food in it and everything. So little things like that I did.
Fantastic. Yeah. So as far as the race itself, you talked about sort of practicing some of these strategies in advance. Did you have a strategy in mind going into this race? And then did you have a distance, a goal in mind for what you wanted to achieve in the 6 days, and from that strategy perspective, how you were going to get to that goal?
Yeah, I did have a strategy. So one of the things that I learned, I think it was in 2022, I was getting ready to run Blackbeard's Revenge 100. And one of my friends, who is a Navy SEAL and runs Forged Glory Athletics, he kind of took me under his wings and he's like, Mike, you've got a tremendous power walk. He said, your run is really awkward. I've had a lot of things happen to the left side of my body. And so my left leg lands really heavy. And he was like, but when you power walk, you land light, you land really, really well. And he said, you can get scooting with your power walk. He said, you should just abandon the run and just do the power walk. He said, in fact, why don't you do the first 50 miles, do your run walk. And once you hit the 50 miles at Blackbeard's, walk the rest of the way and get your power walk into gear. And at, mile 75, start passing people. And so I did that at Blackbeard's and walked the entire last 50 miles. And in the last 25 miles of that race, I passed 22 people. So I knew that I could. So my strategy going into 6 days was, okay, I'm going to start out doing a run walk throughout most of the first day. But at some point I was like, I'm going to transfer over and just see how well I can do this power walk and just plow through the power walk with a little bit of running mixed in every day. So my goal was I have to run at least 25 laps every single day. So I don't know why I came up with 25, but I was like, I want to clip those laps off in the 250 to 325 range and then power walk the rest of them and try and stay, in the, 350 to no more than 5-minute laps. And I was pretty successful doing that. So I was happy with my strategy. And my goal going in was to do 400 miles. And like I said, I've never done a 6-day, so I didn't know what I didn't know. And I was just really blessed. I had some gentlemen talk to me. The first was Mike Dobies, who was the first person I've met. And for those of you who don't know, Mike Dobies is like the biggest statistical guru in the timed event world and like the journey run Laz Lake world that you'll ever meet, and just one of the nicest guys in the world. And he asked me, he said, what's your goal? And I told him I'd like to go over 400 miles. And he said, cut it in half. And I was like, what?
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. I was
Say
like,
again?
I told him, I said, I've already completed Swami Shuffle twice. So that's over 220 miles. I was like, if I cut it in half, that's 200. I was like, I want to do better than I did at Swami. I want to go longer than I did at Swami. He's like, I'm not telling you you're not going to. He said, cut your goal in half and then work your ass off. I was like, okay. So he was the first one. And then there was a gentleman from Scotland, and I can't remember his last name, but Scott took me aside, and he was in the 10-day race, and he needed some stuff from the grocery store. And he asked me to Uber to the grocery store and pick some stuff up. So I did. And I got back and he was like, what's your goal? And I told him 400 miles. He said, cut it in half. He said, this surface is hard. Whatever you think you're going to do, cut it in half and be happy with it and just work hard. And I was like, okay, that's 2.
Okay, that's twice. Yeah.
Like,
what do I not know here?
Very, very interesting. So then in the first day, I'm just kind of running laps and everything and doing my run walk thing and just kind of grooving. And David Johnston, who, for those of you in the ultra running world that follow like runners from way out in the Never Never Land, he is one of the top runners from Alaska who now lives in Missouri. But he's a beast of a runner. I mean, he's just a phenomenal multi-day runner, backyard runner. And he's just, so for him to kind of pull up beside me and just kind of come alongside me. And, he started talking to me about, my gait and everything. He said, man, you land really heavy on your left foot. And he said, what's your goal? And I said, well, I was thinking 400 miles. He said, cut it in half. And I'm like, okay, I'm a dork and I'm not all that smart. But, when three people tell me the same thing, mm-hmm. I can clue in pretty fast. And so I was like, okay, so I'm gonna say, okay, once I pass 222 miles, which is Swami Shuffle, I was like, now I'm in uncharted territory. So that's my goal, is 225 miles. And everything after that is sweet. Yeah, it was amazing. And I'm glad I did that because it enabled me to not focus on the number and to focus on moving efficiently and overcoming the pain. And most of all, you've ran with me. My whole thing is, hey, let's have fun. And I just like to encourage other runners. So whenever I would see a runner, struggling or something, I would just come up alongside of them and I would just encourage them. I just spend some time talking with them, telling them how amazing they were, and just try to encourage them to keep on moving efficiently. And so that's what I spent my whole race doing, was just sliding up. One of the Japanese runners called me the good cheer guy. So, so, I would come up with goofy weather reports every morning. Good morning. It's 55. Today's weather report, it's going to be 55 degrees with 35% humidity. It's going to feel like probably around 52 degrees. Today, there's a 99% chance that you're going to experience some pain, and there's a 100% chance that you're going to experience discomfort. Have a wonderful day. And I just, go around the track doing goofy things like that, just trying to get people to smile. And in the morning you get growls and stuff, but that was my whole goal.
Oh, yeah.
And so once I hit 225 miles, I'm like, I'm in total uncharted territory. And that was in day 4-ish, I think it was. And I was like, well, I got 2 more days. Let's see how much I can do.
Brilliant. Yeah. You're killing me with your weather report, Mike. That's cracking me up. I like it. Very cool. So as part of actually, let me ask this first, because you mentioned the Japanese runner and then the Scottish runner. So there's a bunch of people there. What's really fascinating about this race and other timed events, I think to some degree as well, you're all going round and round and round this track. And so presumably you got to hang out and spend some time with not just back of the packers like we normally do, but all kinds of different speeds and elite runners from all over the place. That must have been a really interesting experience. Did you pick up any tips and tricks as you're going around? Like you were saying, the one guy was like, hey, your gait's kind of off. Like,
yeah, I mean, it was, I got to spend, so Megan Eckert is just an amazing runner. She's been on the Choose to Endure podcast. So those of you who haven't checked out the Choose to Endure podcast with Megan Eckert episode, go check it out. Everything that Megan is on the podcast with Richard, she is in real life too. And she is a beast. She was going after Camille's record. So this is her first attempt at a 6-day thing. She's never tried anything. I think her longest race to date was a 55-hour and maybe a backyard where she did 200 something miles. So that was her furthest. And she's like, I'm going after Camille Herron. And first day, she was like lights out, on fire. Just, you're watching her go around this track. Second day, she really struggled a lot. And so I was walking with her at one point, and, she's just the most amazing, kind, gracious person you could ever be around. You don't think that this is an elite runner. And we were talking and she asked me what I was doing. And I said, well, I'm not focusing on a number. I'm just going to have fun and just see how far I can move this weird body of mine. And she just looked at me and she's like, that's a different goal. And, but it was fun watching her come back alive on day 3 and go out and crush it. And, she finished 526 miles, which, goodness gracious, that's 4th best in the world. So she's a pretty amazing runner. But I got to spend time with amazing runners. A runner that I really, really appreciate, Ivo Majetic. He's a Czech runner who now lives in Colorado, but he is the world's record holder in 48-hour, 72-hour, and 6-day ultra walking category.
Oh.
So he holds all the records in that category. And around the 3rd day, he went and passed me, and he never ran a single step, but the dude passed me a lot. And he ended up being, I think, either 5th or 4th overall, 3rd male with over like 440 miles. I mean, just amazing. And he goes past me and he does this little finger wave with his hands. And I'm going, I think he wants me to kind of try and get on his feet. And so I just kind of fell in behind him. And what I started doing was just try to mimic what he was doing with his walk. Because, I mean, his walk is just vicious, man. I mean, it is the most efficient, lightest touch on the ground walk I've ever seen in my entire life. And just, I mean, he can scoot, man. I mean, he was getting down into the 10s and 11-minute miles. And I was just like, okay. So I stayed on his heels for about an hour. And when we got done, he's like, okay, did you notice what I was doing? And he started teaching me during the race how to walk better, because he said, you're a really efficient power walker. I think you could be really, really good if you would just fully embrace the walking and not try to, correct your gait running and everything. He said, I think you could, at your age, destroy a lot of the age group records.
Wow.
And I was like, wow. And so, he just, I mean, here's the guy with the world record sitting there going, okay, I'm going to take some time and teach this guy. So I spent time with him day 4, 5, and 6, just staying on his heels, him giving me little tips. And my technique got much better during the race, despite all the pain and discomfort that I felt. So yeah, very, very appreciative of the people out there. And these are elites that,
Yeah.
we think, oh, they're not going to spend any time. They won't talk to me. And they would stop and talk to you. They would share tips with you. They would just, like David, picked me up one day. He was like, why are you sitting eating your meal? I was like, what are you talking about? I always sit and eat. He's like, no, you don't. Pick up your meal. Let's go. And he told me to pick up my meal, and we got out on the track and ate our meal on the track. And he's like, this is how you achieve higher mileage. You don't sit down. He said the chair is your enemy. And, so, I mean, it was 6 days of being around people who graciously, if they knew that you were willing to listen, they were willing to share tips with you. And that was amazing.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the things that I love most about this sport. The fact that you get to run with elites. I mean, you can't do that in NFL or soccer or any of that. You don't get to share a field with those folks and play at the same time they do. So, but we do. We get to run with these, and specifically these timed events. You get to share some real time with those folks, just like you're saying. And I think that's really cool. I will say though, taking your dinner with you from Art's Place, if you're having a burger and fries and a beer, probably more difficult to do walking down the street.
I'm going to figure it out next year. Year,
maybe they do a doggy bag.
Me. I don't know how we're going to do the beer though, Richard.
I don't know. We'll have to have a McDonald's cup or something.
To-go cup, do you think?
Yeah,
because
I'm sure.
The beer tasted really good at Art's Place.
It was good. It was good. So just shout out if you're doing Swami Shuffle next year, anybody, you got to stop at Art's Place. On the way down, on the way back, stop there and get a burger, get a beer, sort yourself out before the long desolate stretch, or after the long desolate stretch.
Absolutely.
For sure. So those kind of things, those sort of lessons that you got, Mike, seemed like they were things that went well for you. What else went well for you? Like from the whole race perspective, what really worked for you, and then what didn't work for you?
Okay, so the biggest thing was, I told you that I've wanted to get to that point where physically and mentally I could go no further. So in day 5, it was like sometime before the 6 p.m. turnover, I had gotten to like 270 miles and everything hurt. And I was just like, I got to my table and I was just like, I was going to sit down. I was like, I just need a short little nap. And so I was like, well, I'll throw something down on the floor and sleep on the floor, put a hoodie over me, and I'll just catch a nap. I never even got to that. I laid down on the floor, didn't put anything over me. I was exhausted, mentally exhausted, physically exhausted. And just, I finally realized I had gotten to that point where I'm sitting there going, I can't move another inch. I was done. I was just like, 270 miles is good. I can be proud of this. I can't move another inch. And I was like, whoa. And so I laid there, and about, probably 2 or 3 minutes into laying there, I was like, wait a second. I've always wanted to get to this point. This is where I've always wanted to be. See, now you're talking to a lunatic. So I was like, I'm finally there to that point where I can't physically, mentally push another inch. And so I laid there and I was like, okay, God, this is the point where I finally reached the end of me. So now it's all on you. So I just like rolled everything on him. I was like, okay, if I'm going to continue on to hour 144, it ain't Mikey. So none of it's going to be on me. It's all on you. And I had finally reached the end of me. And so the thing that I am most excited about is finally reaching the end of me and what I was capable of doing, and then going out and doing another 50 miles.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
It was an amazing. So when I finished the race and came across finish line at 1:43:56, I was just ecstatic because I had finally realized that there is so much more than I'm capable of if I'll just get to the end of me. And so that was the point of the race that made everything worthwhile. The aching feet, the muscles that were sore for a week after, I
Yeah.
mean, just mental exhaustion. Mental exhaustion was not something I was prepared for. You asked what was the thing I did wrong. I had not realized how mentally exhausting it would be to run in circles for 6 days.
Wow.
It was mind numbing. I mean, you
Yeah.
just got to a point where it's like, I literally had to force myself to go outside, to leave the track, leave the arena, go outside the dome and go, okay, there's a sky. Look, there's a tree. Look, there's grass. There's a real world that doesn't exist where I'm not hearing, hockey pucks hit the boards. I'm not listening to the of
Yeah.
skates. I'm not hearing all this stuff. I'm not hearing constant music. If I hear pour some sugar on me again, I'm gonna choke somebody. I mean, it was because, I think we had the same songs playing for 6 days. And so the mind numbing exhaustion, I did not prepare well for. So I had to really fight through that and get to find that happy spot. You had to find that spot where it's like, okay, I can move on. All right. I'm okay now. I had my little grouchy moment. No, okay. I'm
Yeah.
just exhausted mentally, and I did not prepare for that. I don't know how you prepare for that, so I'm not sure about the answer to what could I do better there. I'm sure there's something.
Yeah. So the arena wasn't shut off for you guys. They were having ice hockey
Oh yeah,
practice or whatever. I don't know what ice hockey people do. I assume they practice.
yeah, ice hockey, speed skaters, figure skaters. They had younger kids that were in there, and they were doing exercises on, the long track was not iced over, and so they were doing exercises and running around that. And so from 8 a.m. until 8 p.m. there was constant activity in the middle around the rink. So every time you're going around in the middle of the rink, there was always something going on.
How do you shut yourself off from that? Did it happen naturally after a time, or did you have to focus on something else?
I would focus on something else. So, like, for the first time ever, I ran with my headphones on and ran to music. So I would put on some music that would just soothe me, because it just got to the point where there was so much stimulation going on that it was exhausting. And so you had to, I would take and I would put my head down and just concentrate on my feet landing and listen to my music. And then, when you came up on somebody and you were passing them, just scoot over and pass. And, it just got to the point where you just put your head down and say, okay, I'm moving efficiently for the next, and I'd set a time limit. I'd say, okay, for the next 45 minutes, I'm going to move as efficiently as possible. I'm not going to stop. I'm not going to do anything. I'm just going to put my head down and just go. And so you just had to set little things like that to kind of overcome the stimulation, because there's just so much stimulation going on.
Yeah. And talking of stimulation, or lack thereof, I guess, maybe, but from a sleep perspective, I think you mentioned the first night you had an air mattress down by your table. How much did you sleep, and did you stay at the air mattress, or did you go up to the warm room after that, having figured out that it was probably kind of bright and cold?
Yeah, I stayed down there the first night. So the first night I moved so we started at noon and I moved 16 hours. My goal was to move 16 hours, whatever my mileage was at 16 hours, I was going to take a 2-hour nap. So at 16 hours, I laid down thinking, put my feet up on one of the chairs, laid down, covered myself up with my blanket, thinking, covered my eyes with a sock that I had brought to, because I knew I needed something dark to cover my eyes because the lights were never going to be off. And I thought, okay, so I'm out for 2 hours. I was down for like a half hour, and I'm just like, I need earplugs. The one thing I hadn't brought was earplugs. If you're going to stay down, you got to bring earplugs, or you're never going to be able to block out the music and the sound and the people, that are still doing laps going around and talking. And yeah, so the first night I probably maybe got a total of 45 minutes of sleep. And that's why I moved my mattress up the second day. I took a break and said, okay, we're moving the mattress upstairs, going to find a spot, and that's where we're going to try and do sleep breaks from then on.
So how much sleep did you get on those subsequent days upstairs? Did you have planned sleep, or did you just go until you were like, I need to stop?
I had both. So I had planned stops. So every night the goal was to move until past the midnight turnaround, because you turned around and went the other direction every 6 hours. And so the goal was to get to the midnight turnaround, do another couple laps the other direction, and then go up and try and get an hour or 2 hours of just downtime, and realizing that you're not going to get sleep. When I went back and analyzed, so out of 144 hours, I had a total of 32 hours down, whether that was sitting at my table or upstairs trying to get some sleep. And I think I roughly figured that out of the 144 hours that I got a grand total of about 13 hours of sleep.
Wow. That's not a lot.
No.
And well, I just even more mind blowing that you managed to get 322 miles on 13 hours of sleep across 6 days. Very, very cool. Now, Mike, most of our listeners to this show are back of the pack runners as well. Is there any advice that you would have for them, specifically in preparing for and tackling ultra distances, if they're going to step up to hundreds or 200s, or maybe even think about a big timed event, 24-hour or beyond, something like 6 days? From all of your experience, what advice would you give somebody?
Yeah, the biggest advice I would say is run your own race. When you're a back of the pack runner, you're not running for a podium spot. It is me versus me. The biggest thing is work on your mindset. You can be the best runner in the world, but if you don't work on your mindset, you're never going to accomplish big races. So work on your mindset and work on running your own race, run your own pace, and don't let what's going on around you dictate what you can do, because you can probably do much more than you think you're capable of doing. But run your own race at your own pace and realize that you are good enough to finish whatever race you enter.
Fantastic. And it has been a few weeks now since the race itself. So as you look back from your own perspective on the time you spent there, what was the most rewarding thing or interesting part of that whole experience for you?
This is going to sound weird, but the most rewarding part for me was the number of people I encouraged to keep on moving when they thought they couldn't go any further.
Were you able to get them around, get them to the finish?
Yep. There was a 24-hour runner, and he was just hurting really, really bad. And, I stopped by his table and I was like, dude, how many more miles do you need to do? He's like, I got to do like 4 more miles. He's like, but I can't move another inch. I said, okay, let's go 4 miles. And so I just went with him and, just said, we got plenty of time. 4 miles is not a problem. I think he had like 2.5 more hours. And he was just like, I can't move. He's like, I don't have it. I can't move. I was like, come on, let's just go. And so I stayed with him until he finished 4 miles. And then he went and did another 1.5 miles on his own.
Oh, brilliant. Even more.
He ended up with, 101.8 miles in 24 hours and got his buckle that he didn't think he was going to get because he thought he was done. So that was a lot of fun. So there were a lot of people like that I was just able to come along, and I gave everybody nicknames. So, Warrior Princess and Superstar, and I don't even remember some of that, but I gave everybody a nickname. So everybody had a nickname, and I would come up on them and just spend time encouraging them and getting them to just move efficiently. It doesn't matter how fast you're moving, move efficiently.
One of the things about big races like this, I've had friends that have gone and done like a Cocodona 250 or 6 days like this. I mean, these are such huge emotional races. You put such an amount of mental energy into these as much as physical energy. Sometimes it can be tough to figure out, okay, I got to come down off of this. And then what do I do from there? Where do I go from there? Nothing will ever be as big or as bold as these huge races that are out there. So, Mike, I got to ask, where do you go from 6 days in the dome? Like, what is left for you to do since you found the end almost? What is next for Mike?
So next for me is embracing the race walker and working on my power walk to get it down into the 10.5 to 11.5 minute per mile range, and then working on being able to sustain that for a long period of time with the goal to be able to walk a sub 2400 miler and my next 24-hour race, which will be Cape Fear 24-hour down in Lillington, North Carolina in October.
Well, I really hope you can do that, because I think you've got a good shot between you and Lisa Georges. There are some fast walkers out there, and yeah, I will be watching with bated breath to see you do that. I think it'll be really awesome if you can break 24 hours with just walking.
I'm looking forward to it, and hey, anything is possible, right?
Yeah, I mean, I've walked next to Lisa, and I tell you, that lady can walk fast. So if you're right up there with her or better, you have a really good shot at that.
Yeah, she also shared a lot of great tips, and what an overcomer she is. So yeah, Lisa George is one of my favorite, and she finished the third female in the race. She had, I want to say 430 miles or something like that. So yeah, wow. She was amazing.
Just some mind-blowing numbers. It just doesn't even seem possible that people can do this kind of thing. And here we are. But I would have said the same thing about 200 miles, a couple of years ago, right? And then people go and do it, and then you end up doing it. And you're like, okay, I can do these things. And that's what I love about ultra running. It's right there in a nutshell.
And now you're getting ready to go run Cocodona.
Yeah, that's right. Yes, I do have Cocodona coming up. So that will be a new journey for me.
Yeah, Swami's is going to be your warm-up next year for Cocodona, right?
And can you imagine that? A 220-mile warm-up race for Cocodona. What an idiot I am.
That's going to be awesome. I can't wait.
It's going to be brilliant.
I can't wait to see you crush Swami and then go and crush Cocodona. It's going to be awesome.
Well, that's the idea. That's the idea. Now, Mike, on the show here, each episode, we do encourage guests to pick a song to add to the free Spotify Choose to Endure playlist. Usually it's something that will either lift you up or motivate or just something keep you moving while you're out on the trail. Now, you had a good choice here. Mike, do you want to tell us the song you selected and why did you pick this one?
So the song is Better Hands by Pat Barrett. And the reason I picked this song is, we all have our own plans. And I'm unashamedly a Jesus follower. So I have deep beliefs and faith in the ability of a savior to get me to places. And in the Better Hands song, there's a line that says that I have my own plans, but I take my own plans and I set them aside because your hands and your plans are better than mine. And so I've just kind of made that my life's goal in everything I do, whether it's growing a business, whether it's growing a podcast, whether it's completing ultra marathons, whether it's encouraging friends who are going through hard times. There are better hands than ours, and there are better plans than ours.
Wow, I think that's really cool. I love that. I love that reasoning. The song is really good too. We'll definitely make sure to get that added to the playlist, and that way everybody else can enjoy it much like you do.
Thank you.
Well, Mike, thanks again for joining today. I really feel like we've dived into the incredible journey of an ultra runner who's not only conquered some grueling races, but also has been really open enough to share his experiences through his podcast and chatting with us here today. Mike's recent achievement at 6 Days in the Dome, where, again, he ran an astonishing amount of miles, 322, if you can bend your mind around that for a moment. I think that serves as a testament to his dedication, the resilience that he has, and his passion for ultra running that you can tell comes across when he talks. His preparation strategies, the race experience that he talked about, and the mental and physical challenges he overcame provide valuable insights for all of us, both as seasoned runners and if you are an aspiring ultra runner too. I do hope Mike's story has inspired you, whether you're contemplating your first ultra or whether you're looking for motivation to push your limits further down the line. I will, of course, provide links to Mike's podcast in the show notes so that you can go and check out all of the episodes that he has out there when you have a moment. While you're out there doing that, don't forget, You can also subscribe to this show as well, get notified each time a new episode comes out, and of course, follow, share, and review. That would be very much appreciated. Doing any of those things really helps promote the show, helps get the word out, and increases the chances of other runners finding the information that awesome guests like Mike have given up their time to come and share with us. You can find us on Instagram, Facebook, and over on choosetoendure.com. So be sure to head over to any of those spots, check us out, send a message, say hello, suggest a topic if you have a moment. I definitely love getting all those interactions. Until then, continue to run long, run strong, live an ultra life, and keep choosing to endure.